What in the Emperor's name is that thing?
Kill the mutant! Blood for the Blood God!
The warp does not forgive. It does not forget. And it certainly does not care when it tears a soul from one reality and hurls it screaming into another. Logan had survived 2 centuries of wars, betrayals, and deaths that would have broken lesser men. He'd walked through fire, been shot, stabbed, drowned, and blown apart more times than he could count. His healing factor had always brought him back. Always. But nothing, not Weapon X, not the Phoenix, not even Apocalypse, had prepared him for the moment reality itself came apart at the seams. One moment he'd been in the Xavier Institute, arguing with Scott about some mission he'd already forgotten. The next, crimson light exploded through the walls and the world folded inside out. He remembered screaming, remembered claws extending on instinct as something vast and hungry brushed against his mind. Then nothing but the howling of a storm that had no wind, the sensation of falling through colors that had no names, and the certainty that he was being watched by things that should not exist. When Logan hit solid ground, it wasn't the mansion's polished floors that met him. It was scorched earth, still warm from bombardment, littered with debris that looked like it had been chewed and spat out by some massive beast. He rolled to his feet, claws out, senses flaring, and immediately wished he hadn't. The smell hit him first. Burned meat, promethium, ozone, rot. And underneath it all, something wrong. Something that made his healing factor pulse with alarm as if his own body was trying to reject the air itself. His ears picked up the thunder of distant artillery, the screams of dying men, and a low rhythmic chanting that set his teeth on edge. Logan's eyes adjusted to the hellscape around him. The sky was the color of a bruise, choked with smoke and ash that fell like black snow. In the distance, massive structures burned, cathedrals the size of mountains, their Gothic spires collapsing in slow motion. Closer, the ground was cratered and torn, scattered with wreckage that didn't look like any technology he recognized. Vehicles the size of buildings lay on their sides, their armor plating thicker than bank vaults, punctured by weapons that must have hit with the force of tactical nukes. And the bodies. God. The bodies. They weren't just dead, they were destroyed, vaporized, torn apart by firepower that made the Sentinels look like children's toys. Men in crude flak armor lay in pieces, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. Others had been burned so thoroughly that only their skeletons remained, fused to melted metal. Logan had seen war. He'd fought in every major conflict since the 19th century. But this was something else. This was industrial-scale slaughter. The explosion erupted 300 yards to his left, throwing a plume of dirt and body parts into the air. Logan's instincts kicked in. Find cover, assess threats, survive. He sprinted toward the wreckage of what looked like a troop. Transport, his enhanced speed carrying him across the killing field in seconds. As he ran, movement caught his eye. Soldiers, dozens of them advancing in loose formation across the wasteland. They wore uniforms that looked like something from a World War I fever dream. Heavy greatcoats, steel helmets, and armor plates that wouldn't have looked out of place in a medieval arsenal. They carried rifles that crackled with energy, las weapons that spat beams of red light across the battlefield. Behind them, officers in peaked caps barked orders, while men in black coats and skull-faced masks moved between the ranks, executing soldiers who hesitated. Logan's jaw tightened. Shooting your own men. Real nice. Then he saw what they were fighting, and his blood went cold. The enemy wasn't human, not anymore. They'd been human once, maybe, but whatever they were now had been twisted into something obscene. Their flesh was covered in tumors and pustules that wept black ichor. Their eyes glowed with unholy light. Some wore armor marked with 8-pointed stars that seemed to writhe when he looked at them directly. Others had been fused with their weapons, metal and meat blending in ways that defied biology. And they were chanting, words in a language that made Logan's head pound and his healing factor flare as if fighting off poison. One of the twisted things turned toward him, and Logan saw its face split open vertically, revealing rows of teeth and a tongue that forked into 3 writhing appendages. It raised a weapon that looked like a bolter had been crossed with an industrial saw and fired. The round hit the wreckage inches from Logan's head and exploded. Not just exploded, detonated with enough force to blow a crater in the metal. Logan threw himself flat as shrapnel screamed overhead, then rolled and came up running. His claws gleamed in the firelight as he closed the distance. The cultist, that's what it had to be, some kind of cultist, swung its weapon around, but Logan was faster. He ducked under the barrel and drove his claws up through its rib cage, feeling bone and corrupted flesh part like wet paper. The thing screamed, a sound that was equal parts agony and ecstasy, and black blood sprayed across Logan's face. It burned. Not like acid, but like ice, like something fundamentally wrong was trying to seep into his skin. His healing factor kicked in immediately, pushing out the corruption, but the sensation lingered. Whatever these things were, they weren't natural. They weren't even mutants. They were something else entirely. More cultists turned toward him, their glowing eyes locking onto the stranger in their midst. Logan bared his teeth in a feral grin. "All right, Bubs, let's dance." Then the sky tore open. A rift of impossible colors split the clouds, and from it poured things that couldn't exist. Demons. There was no other word for them. Creatures of fang and claw and burning malice, howling as they descended on the battlefield. The soldiers, the human soldiers, opened fire with renewed desperation, their last weapons cutting down the horrors, but for every one that fell, 2 more took its place. Logan's instinct screamed at him to run. Every survival sense he'd honed over 2 centuries told him this was a fight he couldn't win. But as he watched the soldiers die, as he saw men stand their ground against impossible odds, something in him refused to turn away. He'd been a soldier once, a long time ago, and soldiers didn't run. Logan charged into the chaos, claws extended, and the Horus Heresy claimed its newest warrior. Logan tore through the first demon like it was made of paper. His adamantium claws punched through its skull, and the thing dissolved into smoke and screaming before it hit the ground. The second one lunged at him with claws that dripped acid, but Logan was already moving, ducking under its swipe and opening its belly from sternum to spine. It shrieked, a sound that felt like needles in his brain, and collapsed into a puddle of reeking ichor that hissed against the scorched earth. The Imperial Army soldiers stared at him like he'd just stepped out of their nightmares. Logan didn't blame them. He was covered in demon blood, his claws still dripping with corruption that his healing factor was actively burning out of his system. He could feel it trying to take root, trying to worm its way into his cells, but his mutation was relentless. Every cell that got corrupted was replaced in seconds. It hurt like hell, but he'd had worse. "What are you waiting for?" Logan snarled at the nearest soldier, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, his face pale beneath the grime. "Shoot the damn things!" The kid snapped out of his shock and opened fire, his laser gun cutting a red beam through the demon horde. The others followed suit, their discipline reasserting itself. Logan noticed the way they moved, not like modern soldiers, but like trench warfare troops, advancing in waves, covering each other with brutal efficiency. They weren't good. They were survivors. A commissar, one of the black-coated bastards Logan had seen executing his own men, strode toward him through the carnage. The man was tall, his face hard as granite beneath his peaked cap, and he carried a bolt pistol in one hand and a chainsword in the other. The sword's teeth were already slick with blood. "You," the commissar barked, his voice cutting through the battle like a whip crack. "Identify yourself, unit designation, gene markers, and authorization code." Now, Logan retracted his claws and wiped demon blood from his face. "Name's Logan. Don't got a unit, don't got authorization. I'm just trying not to die." The commissar's eyes narrowed. "A deserter, then, or worse, a mutant?" He raised his bolt pistol, the barrel aimed directly at Logan's forehead. The penalty for both is death. Logan didn't flinch. He'd had guns pointed at him more times than he could count. "Go ahead, bub. See what happens." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Around them, the battle raged. Soldiers dying, demons shrieking, artillery pounding the earth. Then another officer appeared, this one wearing the robes of the Mechanicum, his face half covered by a brass rebreather, and his eyes replaced with glowing red augmetics. Cables snaked from his skull into a data slate he carried in mechanical hands. "Commissar Kyle," the tech priest said, his voice a synthesized monotone. "This one is anomalous. Biological readings are inconsistent with standard human baseline. Enhanced cellular regeneration detected. Skeletal structure reinforced with unknown metallurgical compound. Recommend capture for study rather than immediate execution." Kyle didn't lower his weapon. "The Omnissiah's servants may find value in abominations, magos ven. I find only heresy." Logan's patience was wearing thin. "Look, I don't know what the hell is going on here, but I just helped your boys kill those things. That's got to count for something." "It counts for nothing," Kyle said flatly. "Traitors have been known to fight demons when it suits their purposes. You could be a spawn of the warp itself, sent to infiltrate our ranks." A demon chose that moment to burst from the ground behind the commissar, its maw opening wide enough to swallow a man whole. Logan moved on instinct, shoving Kale aside and driving his claws into the creature's throat. It thrashed, nearly taking his arm off, but he held on, twisting his wrist until he felt something vital give way. The demon exploded into ash, and Logan stumbled back, breathing hard. Kale stared at him, his expression unreadable. Then he holstered his bolt pistol. "You fight well, mutant. The Emperor may yet have use for you." He turned to the Magos. "Take him into custody. If he resists, execute him. If he cooperates, we'll determine his fate once this world is secure." Logan wanted to tell them both to go to hell, but he was smart enough to know when he was outgunned. These soldiers had weapons that could vaporize him faster than his healing factor could compensate. And besides, he needed answers. Where was he? What were those things? And how the hell did he get home? "Fine," Logan growled. "But I ain't wearing chains." Kyle's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "We shall see." They marched him back through the ruins of what had once been a city. Logan's senses catalogued everything. The architecture was Gothic and oppressive, all towering spires and gargoyle-covered buttresses. The people who'd lived here had worshipped something, that much was clear. Every building was a cathedral, every street a processional. But now it was all rubble and corpses. Millions dead, if his nose was any judge. The Imperial Army had established a forward base in the remains of a fortress monastery. Sandbag walls and razor wire surrounded makeshift bunkers, and heavy weapons emplacements covered every approach. Soldiers moved with mechanical efficiency, hauling ammunition, tending to the wounded, and burning the dead in massive pyres that sent black smoke into the already poisoned sky. Logan was taken to a holding cell, a reinforced bunker with walls thick enough to stop tank rounds. They didn't chain him, but they didn't need to. 6 soldiers stood guard outside, their laser guns trained on the door, and he could hear the hum of something that sounded like an energy field. He tested it once, reaching out with one claw, and got a jolt that made his teeth rattle. Not enough to stop him if he really wanted out, but enough to make him think twice. Hours passed. Logan sat in the darkness, listening to the sounds of war outside. Artillery thunder, screams, the roar of engines that sounded like they belonged to vehicles the size of buildings. His healing factor had finally purged the last of the demon corruption from his system, but the memory of it lingered. Whatever those things were, they weren't just monsters. They were wrong on a fundamental level, like they violated the laws of nature just by existing. The door finally opened, and Magos Ven entered, flanked by two servitors, lobotomized humans fused with machinery, their eyes blank and drool leaking from slack jaws. Logan's gut twisted. He'd seen cyborgs before, but these weren't volunteers. These were slaves. "You will submit to examination," Ven said, his mechadendrites unfolding from his back like metal tentacles. "Resistance will result in sedation and invasive procedures. Cooperation will be noted in your file." Logan stood slowly, every muscle tensed. "You ain't cutting me open, bub." "That remains to be determined." Ven's augmetic eyes whirred as they focused on Logan's hands. "Extend your claws." Logan hesitated, then popped his claws. The Magos leaned closer, his sensors scanning the adamantium with obvious fascination. "Remarkable," Ven breathed. "The metallurgical composition is unknown to Imperial records. Not ceramite, not auramite. Something older. This is archaeotech, possibly pre-age of strife." His gaze snapped to Logan's face. "Where did you acquire this technology?" "It was a gift," Logan said dryly. "From some real friendly folks who like to experiment on people." Ven's mechadendrites twitched with excitement. "You are a relic then, a remnant of the dark age of technology. The Omnissiah has blessed us with your arrival." "I ain't a relic, I'm a man." "You are a resource," Ven corrected, "and the Imperium will determine how best to utilize you." Logan's claws gleamed in the dim light. "I've heard that before. Didn't end well for the last guys who tried." Before Ven could respond, alarms blared throughout the base. Red emergency lights bathed everything in crimson, and Logan heard the distinctive sound of bolter fire, heavier, deeper than the laser guns. Soldiers were shouting, officers screaming orders, and beneath it all, a sound that made Logan's healing factor spike with alarm. Chanting, the same twisted chanting he'd heard on the battlefield. Ven's augmetics flickered. Traitor forces have breached the perimeter. World Eaters, Khorne's berserkers. He turned to his servitors. "Seal the holding area. The specimen must not fall into enemy hands." Logan's eyes narrowed. "Specimen? That's what I am now?" Ven didn't answer. He was already moving toward the door, his mechadendrites reaching for weapons mounted on his back. The servitors moved to follow, their augmetic limbs whirring. Logan made his decision in a heartbeat. He wasn't going to sit in a cell while a battle raged outside. And he sure as hell wasn't going to let these people treat him like a lab rat. He lunged forward, claws extended, and tore through the servitors before they could react. They collapsed in showers of sparks and leaking fluids. Ven spun around, a plasma pistol appearing in his mechanical hand. But Logan was faster. He slammed the Magos against the wall, claws at his throat. "Here's how this is gonna work," Logan growled. "You're gonna tell me what the hell's going on, where I am, what year it is, and how I get home. Then maybe I don't paint these walls with your circuits." Ven's augmetic eyes blazed with cold light. "You are in the Imperium of Man, the 31st millennium. You're on the world of Galmec, contested between loyalist and traitor forces during the Horus Heresy. And there is no home for you. The warp has claimed you, mutant. You belong to the Emperor now." Logan's blood ran cold. The 31st millennium, 30,000 years in the future. And a war called the Horus Heresy that sounded like it was tearing a galaxy apart. Outside, the chanting grew louder, punctuated by screams and the wet sound of chainswords tearing through flesh. Logan released Ven and headed for the door. "Then I guess I better make myself useful." The base was hell. Not the metaphorical kind Logan had seen in 100 wars, but something worse, something that felt like reality itself was breaking down. He burst from the holding bunker into a scene of absolute carnage. Imperial army soldiers were dying by the dozens, cut down by warriors in blood-red armor who moved with a speed and fury that defied human capability. These weren't men. They were giants, each one standing over 7 feet tall, encased in Baroque power armor, covered in brass chains and the 8-pointed star he'd seen on the cultists. World Eaters, traitor space marines, Khorne's chosen killers. One of them stood in the center of the compound, his chainsword still spinning as it dripped with the remains of a dozen soldiers. His helmet was shaped like a snarling demon, and when he spoke, his voice was amplified by vox casters into a thunderous roar that shook the ground. Blood for the Blood God, skulls for the Skull Throne. The other World Eaters took up the chant, their voices merging into a cacophony that made Logan's head pound. He could feel something in that chant, something that pulled at the rage buried deep in his chest, the berserker fury he'd spent decades learning to control. It whispered to him, promising release, promising freedom from restraint. Logan gritted his teeth and shoved the feeling down. He'd been mind-controlled before. He wasn't going to let it happen again. A World Eater spotted him and charged, his chainsword roaring. Logan waited until the last second, then rolled under the swing and came up inside the traitor's guard. His claws found a gap in the armor at the neck joint and punched through, severing something vital. The World Eater stumbled, black blood spraying from the wound, but he didn't fall. Instead, he swung his elbow back, catching Logan in the ribs with enough force to crack bones. Pain exploded through Logan's chest, but his healing factor was already working, knitting the fractures even as he twisted away. The World Eater turned, raising his chainsword for a killing blow. But Logan was faster. He drove both sets of claws into the traitor's helmet, punching through the eye lenses and into the brain beneath. This time, the World Eater fell. Logan pulled his claws free and looked around. The Imperial soldiers were falling back, their lines collapsing under the World Eater's assault. Commissar Kyle was in the thick of it, his bolt pistol barking as he executed a traitor with a point-blank shot to the head. But there were too many. For every World Eater that fell, 2 more pushed forward, their armor soaking up laser gun fire like it was nothing. Then Logan heard it, a sound that cut through even the World Eater's chanting. A howl, primal, savage, and utterly inhuman. It came from the sky, and when Logan looked up, he saw drop pods screaming down through the smoke and ash. They hit the ground like meteors, their impact craters throwing up waves of dirt and debris. The pods opened, and out stepped warriors in gray armor marked with wolf totems and runes that seemed to glow with their own light. Space wolves, loyalist space marines, and they were pissed. The lead wolf was massive, even by space marine standards, his armor scarred by centuries of warfare. He carried a frost axe that crackled with power, and when he spoke, his voice was a growl that could have come from Logan's own throat. "World Eaters," the wolf bellowed. "You dishonor the All-Father's legacy. Come face the Sons of Russ, and we'll send you howling back to the warp." The World Eaters roared in response and charged. The 2 forces collided in the center of the compound with a sound like thunder. Chainswords met frost blades, bolter fire tore through armor, and blood, both red and black, sprayed across the scorched earth. Logan found himself caught between the 2 armies, and his instincts kicked in. He wasn't going to stand around and get crushed. He needed to move, to fight, to survive. A World Eater came at him from the left, and Logan ducked under his swing, his claws finding the weak points in the traitor's armor with practiced precision. Another came from the right, and Logan spun, his adamantium claws deflecting a chainsword blow that would have taken his head off. Then one of the space wolves was beside him, his frost blade cleaving through a World Eater's torso with brutal efficiency. The wolf glanced at Logan, his enhanced senses taking in everything in a fraction of a second. The claws, the healing factor, the feral way Logan moved. "You fight like a wolf, little brother," the space wolf said, his voice carrying approval. "But you stink of the warp," What are you? Someone who's trying not to die. Logan shot back, driving his claws through another World Eater's throat. You got a problem with that? The Space Wolf laughed, a sound like grinding stone. No problem at all, just don't get in my way. He charged back into the fray, his frost blade singing as it cut down traitors. Logan followed, his claws flashing in the firelight. He moved through the battle like he'd been born to it, his centuries of combat experience guiding every strike, every dodge, every kill. The World Eaters were stronger, faster, and better armored, but Logan was relentless. Every time they cut him down, he got back up. Every time they thought they'd killed him, his healing factor brought him back. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The Space Wolves were pushing the World Eaters back, their superior discipline and coordination overwhelming the traitors' berserker fury. The Imperial Army soldiers rallied, their lasguns cutting down wounded World Eaters before they could recover. And in the center of it all, Logan fought alongside the wolves like he'd been part of their pack his entire life. The lead wolf, Logan heard the others call him Gunnar Bloodfang, decapitated the last World Eater with a single stroke of his frost axe. The traitor's body collapsed, and silence fell over the compound. The Space Wolves stood among the carnage, their armor dented and scorched but unbroken. The Imperial soldiers stared at them with something between awe and terror. Gunnar turned to Logan, his eyes, one human, one augmetic, studying him with predatory intensity. "You're no Imperial citizen," he said. "Your scent is wrong. Your gene markers are corrupted. But you fought well, and that counts for something." He planted his frost axe in the ground and leaned on it. "So I'll ask you once, and you'll answer true. What are you, and why does the warp reek on you like a fresh kill?" Logan retracted his claws and met the Space Wolf's gaze without flinching. He'd learned a long time ago that predators respected strength, not submission. "Name's Logan. I'm from somewhere else. Somewhere a long way from here. I got pulled through some kind of rift, and now I'm stuck in your war. I don't know how I got here, and I don't know how to get back, but I'm not your enemy." Gunnar's augmetic eye whirred as it focused on Logan's face, scanning for deception. "The warp takes many forms," he said slowly. "Demons, sorcerers, abominations that wear human faces, but it rarely spits out warriors who fight like wolves." He straightened, pulling his axe from the ground. "You'll come with us. The route needs every claw it can get, and if you're lying, I'll tear your throat out myself." Logan nodded. He didn't have much choice, and honestly, these Space Wolves were the first people in this nightmare who treated him like a warrior instead of a lab specimen. "Fair enough," Gunnar grinned, showing teeth that had been filed to points. "Good, then welcome to the Vulca Fenrica, little brother. The Space Wolves have claimed you." He turned to his pack. "Load up. We've got a war to fight, and the Allfather's watching." The Space Wolves moved with practiced efficiency, securing the compound and tending to their wounded. Logan noticed they didn't bother with the Imperial Army soldiers. Those were beneath their concern. But they treated their own with a fierce loyalty that reminded Logan of the X-Men back when things were simpler. Commissar Kyle approached, his face grim. "Lord Gunnar," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "That mutant is Imperial property. He was being held for interrogation and study by the Mechanicum." Gunnar's grin vanished, replaced by a look of cold fury. "The route doesn't answer to pencil pushers and tech priests, Commissar. This one fought beside us. That makes him pack. And if you've got a problem with that, you can take it up with my frost axe." Kyle's hand moved toward his bolt pistol, but he stopped when he saw the other Space Wolves turning to face him, their weapons ready. The message was clear. Challenge one wolf, and you challenged the pack. Kale lowered his hand. "As you say, Lord Gunnar, but the Mechanicum will want answers." "Then they can ask the Allfather," Gunnar said dismissively. He turned back to Logan. "Come on, little brother. We've got a Thunderhawk waiting, and the war won't fight itself. Logan followed the Space Wolves to their transport, a massive gunship that looked like it could level a city block. As he climbed aboard, he caught a glimpse of Magos Ven watching from the ruins, his augmetic eyes glowing with cold calculation. Logan knew he hadn't seen the last of the tech priest, but for now, he had bigger problems. He was 30,000 years in the future, caught in the middle of a galactic civil war, and apparently adopted by a pack of superhuman wolf warriors who thought he smelled like the warp. The Thunderhawk's engines roared to life, and Logan felt the transport lift off, carrying him away from the burning city and toward whatever fresh hell waited in the stars. He looked at Gunnar, who was checking his frost axe for damage. "So what's this Horus Heresy you people keep talking about?" Gunnar's expression darkened. "Brother against brother, Primarch against Primarch. Half the legions have turned traitor, corrupted by the ruinous powers. The War Master Horus, once the Emperor's favored son, now leads the greatest betrayal in human history. The galaxy burns, and we fight to keep the Imperium from falling into darkness." Logan's jaw tightened. He'd seen civil wars before. He'd fought in them, but this sounded like something on a scale he couldn't even imagine. "And which side are you on?" Gunnar looked at him like he'd just asked if water was wet. "We're Space Wolves, little brother. We're on the side of the Allfather. We're on the side of Leman Russ, and we'll fight until every traitor is dead or we are." He grinned again, savage and wild. "Welcome to the rout. Try to keep up." Logan leaned back against the Thunderhawk's hull and closed his eyes. He'd survived Weapon X. He'd survived the Phoenix. He'd survived Apocalypse and Magneto and Sabretooth and 100 other nightmares. He'd survived this too. The Thunderhawk carried them through a sky that looked like it was dying. Logan pressed his face against the viewport, watching as the planet below revealed its true horror. Entire continents burned. Cities the size of Earth's largest nations were reduced to glowing craters, and in the distance he could see ships, massive cathedral-sized vessels locked in combat, their weapons carving lines of fire across the void. "First time seeing a compliance world fall?" Gunnar asked, settling into the seat beside Logan. The Space Wolf was too large for the restraints, so he simply braced himself against the hull. "Gets easier after the first 100. "Does it?" Logan asked, his voice flat. Gunnar's grin faded. "No, but you learn to live with it." He gestured toward the burning world below. Galmec was a loyal world. Swore fealty to the Emperor during the Great Crusade, built temples in his name, sent their sons to fight in the Imperial Army. His augmetic eye whirred, zooming in on something Logan couldn't see. Then the word-bearers came, Lorgar's sons, preaching their new gospel. They turned half the planet's population into cultists before we even knew they were here. By the time the rout arrived, it was too late to save anyone. All we could do was kill the traitors and burn the corruption. Logan had seen fanaticism before. He'd fought in religious wars, watched zealots destroy themselves and everyone around them in the name of their gods. But this was different. This was corruption on a planetary scale, entire populations twisted into something inhuman. "These word-bearers," Logan said. "They the ones who worship chaos?" Gunnar spat on the deck, a gesture of pure contempt. "Aye, they abandoned the Emperor's truth for the lies of the warp. Now they spread their poison wherever they go, turning worlds into demon-infested hellscapes." He looked at Logan, his expression serious. "That's what you felt down there, little brother. That pull toward rage, toward letting go. That was Khorne, the blood god, trying to sink his claws into you. The fact that you resisted says something about your strength. Most men don't get a second chance." Logan thought about the whispers he'd heard during the battle, the way his berserker rage had threatened to slip its leash. He'd felt something similar before, during his worst moments when the animal inside him wanted to take over completely. But this had been different. This hadn't been his rage, It had been something external, something that wanted to use him. "I've spent a long time learning to control my rage," Logan said. "I ain't about to give it up to some warp god." "Good," Gunnar said, "because where we're going, you'll need that control." He stood as the Thunderhawk began its descent. "We're heading to Fenris Station, a void fortress in high orbit. The route's been using it as a staging ground for operations across the sector. You'll meet Jarl Sven Bloodhowl there. He commands this warband, and he'll decide what to do with you." Logan didn't like the sound of that. "And if he decides I'm not worth keeping around?" Gunnar's grin returned. "Then you'll get to test that healing factor of yours against a power fist. But I've already vouched for you, so unless you do something stupid, you should be fine." He paused. "Try not to do something stupid." The Thunderhawk shuddered as it entered the docking bay of Fenris Station. Logan felt the artificial gravity kick in, heavier than Earth's, and his healing factor adjusted automatically. The rear ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics, revealing a hangar that looked like it had been carved from a mountain and then covered in wolf pelts and runic inscriptions. Space wolves moved through the hangar with purposeful efficiency, their armor bearing the scars of countless battles. Servitors and chapter serfs, baseline humans who served the Legion, scurried between the warriors, hauling ammunition and performing maintenance. The air smelled of promethium, ozone, and something Logan couldn't quite identify, something primal and wild, like the scent of a wolf pack's den. Gunnar led Logan through the station, and everywhere they went, space wolves stopped to stare. Logan could feel their enhanced senses studying him, cataloging every detail. Some looked curious, others looked hostile, all of them looked dangerous. They entered a great hall that reminded Logan of something out of Norse mythology. Long tables lined the walls, covered with food and drink. Pelts and trophies hung from the ceiling. Xeno skulls, traitor armor, and things Logan didn't have names for. At the far end of the hall, seated on a throne made from the bones of some massive creature, was the largest space marine Logan had seen yet. Jarl Sven Bloodhowl was a mountain of a man, his armor ancient and covered in kill markings that numbered in the thousands. His face was scarred and weathered, his beard braided with bone beads, and his eyes, both natural, burned with an intensity that made Logan's instincts scream danger. A massive thunder hammer rested across his lap, its head crackling with barely contained energy. "So," Bloodhowl rumbled, his voice like an avalanche, "this is the warp-touched mutant who fights like a wolf." He leaned forward, studying Logan with the focus of a predator sizing up potential prey. "Gunnar tells me you killed 3 World Eaters and didn't stay dead when they tried to kill you. Impressive. But the route doesn't need impressive. We need loyal. We need fierce. We need warriors who'll stand with their pack when the galaxy goes to hell." He stood, and the thunder hammer rose with him. "So I'm going to give you a choice, mutant. You can join the route as a skald, a warrior companion, not a true wolf, but honored nonetheless. You'll fight beside us, bleed beside us, and maybe die beside us. Or you can walk away, and we'll drop you on the nearest world and forget you ever existed." Logan met Bloodhowl's gaze without flinching. "What's the catch?" Bloodhowl laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "The catch is that if you betray us, if you fall to chaos, if you prove yourself weak or craven, I'll kill you myself. And I don't care how good your healing factor is, I'll keep killing you until you stay dead." He gestured around the hall. "But if you prove yourself worthy, you'll have the protection of the Vulca Fenrica. No mechanicum will cut you open, no commissar will execute you. You'll be packed, and the pack protects its own." Logan thought about his options. He was stranded in a galaxy at war, 30,000 years from home, with no way back. He could try to survive on his own, but he'd seen what this universe did to lone wolves. They died screaming, or worse, they fell to chaos and became the very monsters he'd been fighting. The space wolves weren't saints. They were brutal, savage, and probably had their own dark secrets, but they fought for something, and they protected their own. That was more than Logan had right now. "All right," Logan said. "I'm in. But I fight my way, and I don't take orders I don't agree with." The hall went silent. Several space wolves reached for their weapons, their faces darkening at what they saw as insubordination. But Bloodhowl just laughed again. "You've got stones, mutant. I'll give you that." He descended from his throne, each step shaking the deck. But here's how it works in the rout. You can question orders, you can argue tactics, you can even challenge your superiors to combat if you think they're wrong. But once the Jarl makes a decision, you follow it, because hesitation gets your packmates killed, and that's the one sin we don't forgive. He extended his hand, massive, scarred, and capable of crushing Logan's skull like an egg. "Do we have an accord?" Logan took the hand and shook it. Bloodhowl's grip was like a vice, testing his strength, but Logan didn't back down. After a moment, the Jarl released him and nodded in approval. "Welcome to the rout," scowled Logan. "Gunnar, get him equipped. We deploy to Krelian Prime in 6 hours. The Death Guard are trying to turn it into a plague world, and we're going to stop them." Gunnar clapped Logan on the shoulder, hard enough to stagger him. "Come on, little brother. Let's get you some proper armor. Can't have you fighting in those rags." Logan followed Gunnar out of the Great Hall, and as they walked, he realized something. For the first time since he'd been torn from his universe, he didn't feel completely alone. The Space Wolves were brutal and savage, but they were also loyal and fierce. They reminded him of the X-Men in a way, warriors who fought for each other, even when the rest of the galaxy wanted them dead. Maybe he could survive this after all. Gunnar led him to an armory that looked like it had been stocked for a small army. Weapons lined the walls, bolt pistols, chainswords, plasma guns, and things Logan didn't recognize. Armor stood on racks, each suit bearing the scars of previous owners. "Most of this won't fit you," Gunnar said, scanning the racks. "You're too small for Astartes armor and too big for mortal gear." He pulled out a suit of carapace armor, reinforced with ceramite plates. "This should work. It's salvaged from a Tempestus Scion, elite Imperial Guard. Won't stop a direct hit from a bolter, but it'll keep you alive long enough for that healing factor to kick in." Logan examined the armor. It was heavier than anything he'd worn before, but his enhanced strength could handle it. He started strapping it on, piece by piece, while Gunnar watched with approval. "You'll need a weapon too," Gunnar said. He held up a chainsword. "Standard issue for..." "I got weapons," Logan said, popping his claws. The adamantium gleamed in the armory's harsh lighting. Gunnar's eyes widened slightly. "Those are impressive. But you'll want something with range. The Death Guard fight with plague weapons. Bolters loaded with virus rounds. Blight grenades, rot-covered blades. You don't want to get close unless you have to." Logan reluctantly accepted a bolt pistol. The weapon was heavy, designed for hands larger than his, but he could manage. Gunnar showed him how to load and fire it, and Logan practiced a few times, getting a feel for the recoil. "Not bad," Gunnar said. "You're a natural." He handed Logan a bandolier of magazines. "Try not to shoot any of us by accident?" "No promises," Logan said with a smirk. They returned to the Great Hall, where the Space Wolves were preparing for deployment. Logan watched as they performed pre-battle rituals, sharpening blades, reciting sagas, howling to honor their Primarch. It was savage and primal, but there was a beauty to it. These warriors knew they might die in the next battle, and they faced that reality with defiance and joy. Bloodhowl appeared beside Logan, his thunderhammer slung across his back. Nervous scowled. "I've been in worse situations," Logan said. "No," Bloodhowl said flatly. "You haven't. The Death Guard are Mortarian's sons, traitors who've embraced Nurgle, the Plague God. They don't just kill, they corrupt. They turn worlds into festering hells where disease is eternal and death is a mercy that never comes. He looked at Logan with something that might have been sympathy. Your healing factor might save you from their weapons, but it won't save you from seeing what they do to innocent people. Steel yourself, Skjald. The heresy will test you in ways you can't imagine. Logan thought about all the horrors he'd seen in his 2 centuries. Wars, genocides, experiments that turned people into monsters. He'd thought he'd seen the worst humanity had to offer, but as the Thunderhawks launched from Fenris Station and carried the Space Wolves toward Krelian Prime, Logan realized he'd been wrong. The worst was still to come. Krelian Prime was dying. Not in the quick, violent way Kalmec had died, but slowly, rotting from the inside out like a corpse left in the sun. Logan could smell it before they even entered the atmosphere. A stench so overwhelming that even his enhanced senses recoiled. It was the smell of decay, of flesh gone to putrefaction, of disease so virulent it seemed to have a life of its own. The Thunderhawk shuddered as it descended through clouds that weren't clouds at all, but airborne plague spores thick enough to choke unprotected humans in seconds. Logan watched through the viewport as the planet's surface came into view, and his healing factor spiked in alarm at what it saw. The cities were still standing, but they'd been transformed into something obscene. Buildings wept with condensation that looked like pus. Streets ran with rivers of filth, and everywhere, covering every surface like a cancerous growth, was a thick greenish mold that pulsed with unnatural life. Flies the size of dogs swarmed in massive clouds, and Logan could see shapes moving through the streets below. Plague zombies. People who'd been infected by Nurgle's gifts and transformed into shambling vectors of disease. Emperor's teeth. One of the younger space wolves muttered, making the sign of the Aquila across his chest. "Steady, pup," Gunnar growled. "The Death Guard want you to despair. They want you to think this world is already lost. But we're the route, and we don't surrender. We fight until the last traitor is dead or we are." The Thunderhawk landed in what had once been a military base on the outskirts of the capital. Imperial Army forces had established a perimeter here, but Logan could see they were barely holding on. Soldiers stood at their posts with rebreathers and sealed armor, but even from a distance he could see the signs of infection, the tremors, the lesions, the vacant stares of men who knew they were already dead. Bloodhowl was the first out of the Thunderhawk, his thunderhammer crackling with power. "Wolves, form up! We're heading to the planetary governor's palace. Intelligence says the Death Guard have turned it into a ritual site. They're trying to summon a great unclean one, a greater demon of Nurgle. If they succeed, this world is finished." The Space Wolves howled in response, their voices carrying across the blighted landscape. Logan followed Gunnar out of the transport, his new armor feeling strange but serviceable. The moment his boots hit the ground, he felt it. A wrongness in the air itself, like reality was sick and getting worse. His healing factor went into overdrive immediately. He could feel microscopic organisms trying to invade his body, plague spores that would kill a normal human in seconds. But his mutation was relentless, burning out the infection as fast as it tried to take root. It hurt, a constant low-grade agony that made his skin crawl, but he'd had worse. An Imperial Army colonel approached Bloodhowl, his face pale beneath his rebreather. "Lord Jarl, thank the Emperor you're here. We've lost contact with 3 regiments in the capital. The Death Guard are..." He broke off, coughing, and Logan saw blood fleck the inside of his mask. The man was infected. He just didn't know he was dead yet. Bloodhowl saw it too. His expression softened slightly, the closest thing to compassion Logan had seen from him. "You've done your duty, Colonel. The route will take it from here. Get your men to the Medici stations. There's still time." They both knew it was a lie, but the Colonel nodded gratefully and staggered away. Logan watched him go, his jaw tight. This was what the Heresy did. It didn't just kill soldiers, it killed hope. "Move out," Bloodhowl commanded, and the space wolves advanced into the city. The streets were a nightmare. Plague zombies shuffled through the filth, their bodies so bloated with disease that they barely looked human anymore. The space wolves cut them down without hesitation, their bolters barking as mass-reactive rounds exploded infected flesh. Logan stayed close to Gunnar, his bolt pistol in one hand and his claws extended on the other. A zombie lurched toward him, its mouth hanging open in a silent scream. Logan put a bolt round through its skull, and the creature's head exploded in a spray of rotten meat and flies. More came, drawn by the noise, and Logan found himself fighting in close quarters, exactly what Gunnar had warned him against. The zombie grabbed his arm, its fingers sinking into his armor, and Logan felt its diseased flesh burn against his skin. His healing factor flared, fighting off the infection, but the pain was intense. He drove his claws through the zombie's chest and threw it aside, then stumbled back, breathing hard. "Stay in formation," Gunnar barked, pulling Logan behind the space wolves' firing line. "Don't let them touch you." "Little late for that," Logan growled, looking at his arm. The skin was blistered and weeping, but even as he watched, his healing factor was repairing the damage. Slowly, too slowly, Gunnar's expression darkened. "Nurgle's plagues fight regeneration. Your healing factor will win eventually, but it's going to hurt like hell until it does." He handed Logan a syringe filled with glowing blue liquid. "Antitoxin. Won't cure you, but it'll help." Logan injected himself and felt the pain recede slightly. Not much, but enough to keep fighting. "Thanks." "Don't thank me yet," Gunnar said. "We're not even to the palace." They pushed deeper into the city, and the resistance grew fiercer. Cultists appeared on rooftops and in alleyways, firing rusted autoguns and throwing blight grenades that exploded in clouds of toxic gas. The space wolves weathered the attacks with contemptuous ease, their power armor shrugging off small arms' fire. But Logan had to be more careful. His armor could stop some hits, but not all of them. A blight grenade landed near him, and Logan threw himself behind a ruined wall as it detonated. Green gas billowed out, and Logan felt it searing his lungs even through his rebreather. He coughed, tasting blood, and his healing factor kicked in again, but he could feel it struggling, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of toxins in the air. "How much farther?" Logan rasped. 2 kilometers, Bloodhowl said, his voice coming through the Vox link in Logan's helmet. "And it's going to get worse. The Death Guard know we're coming." He wasn't wrong. They reached the Palace District, and Logan saw the Death Guard for the first time. They were space marines, like the wolves, but corrupted beyond recognition. Their armor was the color of rotting flesh, covered in rust and filth and things that might have been tumors or might have been smaller demons growing from their bodies. They moved with the slow, inexorable advance of a plague. Not fast, but unstoppable. And they stank. Even through his rebreather, Logan could smell them, a stench so foul it made the plague zombies smell like roses by comparison. "Death Guard!" Bloodhowl roared. "For Russ and the All-Father!" The space wolves charged, and the two forces collided with a sound like a building collapsing. Bolters roared, chainswords screamed, and Logan found himself in the middle of a battle between demigods. A Death Guard turned toward him, his helmet cracked and weeping ichor, and raised a bolter. Logan dove aside as the weapon fired, the bolt round missing him by inches and exploding against the wall behind him. He came up running, closing the distance, and drove his claws into the Death Guard's neck. The traitor didn't fall. He just looked down at Logan with eyes that glowed with sick green light and laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. "The Grandfather's gifts are eternal, mortal. You cannot kill what has already embraced death." Logan snarled and twisted his claws, severing the Death Guard's spine. The traitor finally collapsed, but Logan could see his body already beginning to regenerate, pustules forming over the wound. Disgusted, Logan grabbed a crack grenade from his belt. Gunnar had insisted he carry explosives, armed it, and shoved it into the Death Guard's mouth. He ran. The grenade detonated, and this time, the Death Guard stayed down. The battle raged for what felt like hours. The Space Wolves were winning, but slowly, and every victory came at a cost. Logan saw one of the younger wolves, the pup who'd muttered a prayer earlier, get grabbed by a Death Guard and pulled into a bear hug. The traitor's armor ruptured, spewing toxic sludge all over the wolf, and Logan watched in horror as the young Space Marine's armor began to corrode, the ceramite bubbling and melting. Gunnar put a bolt round through the Death Guard's head and pulled his packmate free, but Logan could see it was too late. The young wolf's face was already blistering, his eyes weeping blood. He tried to speak, but only a wet gurgle came out. Gunnar held him as he died, reciting a saga in a language Logan didn't understand. When it was over, Gunnar gently closed the young wolf's eyes and stood, his face a mask of cold fury. "They'll pay for that," Gunnar said quietly. "Every last one of them." They finally reached the palace gates, and Logan saw what the Death Guard had been protecting. The palace courtyard had been transformed into a ritual site. A massive summoning circle drawn in blood and filth, with corpses arranged in blasphemous patterns. And in the center, chanting in a language that made Logan's head pound, was a Death Guard in Terminator armor so ancient and corroded it looked like it might fall apart at any moment. But Logan could feel the power radiating from him. This wasn't just a plague marine. This was a sorcerer, a champion of Nurgle, and he was seconds away from completing his ritual. "That's Typhon the Traveler," Bloodhowl said, his voice tight with hatred. "One of Mortarian's chosen. If he finishes that ritual, the demon he summons will kill everyone on this planet." "Then we stop him," Logan said. Bloodhowl looked at him, and for the first time, Logan saw something like respect in the Jarl's eyes. "Aye, we stop him." He raised his thunder hammer. "Wolves, with me!" The Space Wolves charged into the courtyard, and the final battle began. Typhon the Traveler turned from his ritual as the Space Wolves charged, and Logan saw his face through the cracked visor of his Terminator helmet. What remained of it, anyway. Half the sorcerer's face was gone, replaced by writhing maggots and fungal growths that pulsed with sickly bioluminescence. His remaining eye glowed with the same diseased green as the other Death Guard, but there was intelligence there. Ancient, malevolent intelligence that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "Space Wolves," Typhon said, his voice a wet rasp amplified by his armor's vox casters. "The grandfather told me you would come. He has prepared gifts for you." He raised one corroded hand, and the corpses arranged around the summoning circle began to twitch and rise. Not as zombies, as something worse. The corpses split open, and from their ruptured bodies emerged demons, plague-bearers, foot soldiers of Nurgle's legions. They were hunched, rotting things with single horns jutting from their foreheads and rusted swords clutched in diseased hands. They moved with surprising speed, their cyclopean eyes fixed on the Space Wolves with predatory hunger. "Demons!" Bloodhowl roared. "Sanctify your weapons. Show these warp spawn what it means to face the Sons of Russ." The Space Wolves' weapons began to glow with a cold blue light, some kind of blessing or enchantment that Logan didn't understand but could feel in his bones. The wolves crashed into the plague-bearer horde with renewed fury, their frost blades and blessed bolters tearing through demonic flesh with brutal efficiency. Logan found himself facing 3 plague-bearers, their rusted swords raised to strike. He didn't have blessed weapons, but his claws were adamantium, and adamantium didn't corrode. He hoped. The first plague-bearer swung at him, and Logan ducked under the blow, his claws finding the demon's exposed belly. The creature shrieked, a sound that felt like insects crawling in his ears, and tried to grab him with its free hand. Logan twisted away, severing the hand at the wrist, then drove his claws through the plague-bearer's skull. It dissolved into foul-smelling ichor, but the other two were already on him. Logan fought like an animal, his claws flashing in the diseased light. Every cut, every strike, was precise and lethal. He'd been fighting for 2 centuries, and demons or not, these things bled just like everything else. One plague bearer fell, then the other, and Logan stood among their dissolving remains, breathing hard. His healing factor was struggling. The demonic ichor burned wherever it touched his skin, and he could feel something trying to take root in his cells, not just disease, but corruption. The warp itself trying to twist him into something monstrous. But Logan had spent his entire life fighting to stay human, to hold on to his humanity even when the world tried to turn him into a weapon. He wasn't going to lose that fight now. He gritted his teeth and pushed back against the corruption, his healing factor flaring with desperate intensity. Slowly, painfully, it began to win. The ichor burned away, the corruption was purged, and Logan remained himself, but it had cost him. He could feel his healing factor slowing, exhausted by the constant onslaught of toxins and warp energy. He was still faster and stronger than any normal human, but he wasn't invincible. Not here, not against this. "Logan," Gunner's voice cut through the chaos. "Get to Typhon, we'll hold the demons." Logan looked across the courtyard and saw Typhon still chanting, his ritual nearly complete. The air above the summoning circle was beginning to tear, reality splitting like rotten fabric, and through the gap, Logan could see something massive and terrible stirring in the warp beyond. The Great Unclean One. If it manifested fully, this world was finished. Logan ran, his boots splashing through filth and ichor. Plague bearers tried to intercept him, but the space wolves cut them down, clearing a path. Logan reached the edge of the summoning circle and leaped, his claws extended, aiming for Typhon's throat. The sorcerer moved with surprising speed for something in Terminator armor. He caught Logan mid-leap with one massive hand, his fingers closing around Logan's throat like a vice. Logan felt his windpipe collapse, felt bones crack, but his healing factor was already working to repair the damage. "Interesting," Typhon said, studying Logan like a scientist examining a particularly fascinating specimen. "You are not Space Marine, yet you heal like one, and you're sent. You reek of the warp, yet you resist its gifts. What are you, little mortal?" Logan couldn't speak with his throat crushed, so he answered by driving his claws into Typhon's wrist. The adamantium punched through the corroded Terminator armor, and Typhon hissed in pain, dropping Logan. Logan hit the ground, gasping as his healing factor repaired his throat. "I'm the guy who's gonna kill you," he rasped. Typhon laughed, a wet, bubbling sound. "Bold words, but you are already dying, mortal. I can smell the grandfather's gifts working in your flesh. Your healing factor fights bravely, but it cannot win. Soon you will embrace decay, and you will thank me for the blessing." Logan looked down at his hands and saw that Typhon was right. His skin was covered in lesions, pustules forming and bursting in an endless cycle. His healing factor was fighting, but it was losing ground. The accumulated damage from the plague zombies, the blight grenades, the plague bearers, and now Typhon's touch. It was too much. Even his mutation had limits, but Logan had never let limits stop him before. He forced himself to his feet, his claws dripping with ichor and blood. "I've been dying my whole life, bub. Ain't stopped me yet." He charged again, and this time Typhon was ready. The sorcerer raised his other hand, and a wave of flies erupted from his palm, swarming over Logan in a buzzing, biting cloud. Logan felt them crawling into his mouth, his nose, his ears, trying to burrow into his brain. His healing factors screamed in protest, burning them out, but more kept coming. Through the swarm, Logan saw Typhon turn back to his ritual, the final words of the summoning on his lips. The tear in reality widened, and a hand, massive, bloated, covered in sores, reached through from the other side. Logan knew he had one chance, One shot to stop this before it was too late. He grabbed a cracked grenade from his belt, armed it, and threw it with all his strength. Not at Typhon, at the summoning circle itself. The grenade hit dead center and detonated, the explosion tearing through the carefully arranged corpses and disrupting the ritual pattern. The tear in reality shuddered, and the great unclean one's hand recoiled, its roar of frustration echoing across dimensions. Typhon spun toward Logan, his remaining eye blazing with fury. "You dare?" "Yeah," Logan said, spitting out flies. "I dare." Typhon raised both hands, and Logan knew he was about to die. The sorcerer was gathering power, the warp coalescing around him in a visible aura of rot and decay. Whatever he was about to unleash would overwhelm Logan's healing factor completely. But before Typhon could strike, a thunder hammer crashed into his side with the force of a meteor. Bloodhowl stood over the fallen sorcerer, his armor dented and scorched but intact. "No one," the Jarl growled, "threatens my pack." He brought the thunder hammer down again and again, each blow accompanied by a crack of thunder and a flash of lightning. Typhon's Terminator armor cracked, then shattered, and finally the sorcerer's body ruptured, spilling diseased organs and maggots across the courtyard. But Typhon wasn't dead. His remains began to crawl back together, his flesh regenerating with obscene speed. "The grandfather's gifts are eternal," he wheezed. "You cannot kill me, Wolf. I'm beyond death." Bloodhowl looked at Gunnar. "Flamer! Now!" Gunnar tossed his Jarl a flamer, a weapon that spat gouts of burning promethium. Bloodhowl caught it one-handed and turned it on Typhon's remains. The flames roared, consuming the sorcerer's regenerating flesh, and this time, Typhon's screams were genuine. The fire burned away the corruption, burned away the warp's hold, and when it finally died down, there was nothing left but ash. The summoning circle collapsed, the tear in reality sealed, and the plague bearers, cut off from their master's power, began to dissolve back into the warp. The space wolves howled in victory, their voices echoing across the blighted city. They'd won. Against impossible odds, they'd stopped the ritual and saved Krelian Prime, or what was left of it. Logan collapsed to his knees, his healing factor finally catching up with all the damage he'd taken. The lesions on his skin began to heal, the corruption burning away, and the pain receded to a dull ache. He'd survived. Barely. Gunnar appeared beside him, offering a hand. Logan took it and let the space wolf pull him to his feet. "You did well, little brother," Gunnar said. "That grenade throw saved us all." "Just doing what needed doing," Logan muttered. Bloodhowl approached, his thunder hammer slung across his back. He studied Logan for a long moment, then nodded. "You've earned your place in the rout," scowled Logan. "You fought with courage and cunning, and you put the pack before yourself. That's what it means to be a wolf." He placed one massive hand on Logan's shoulder. "Welcome to the Vulca Fenrica, truly this time." Logan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Acceptance, belonging. He was still stranded 30,000 years in the future, still trapped in a galaxy at war, but he wasn't alone. He had a pack now. "Thanks," Logan said quietly. Bloodhowl's expression turned grim. "Don't thank me yet. The heresy is far from over, and the worst is still to come. But you'll face it with us, and that means you'll face it with honor." He turned to address the rest of the war band. "Wolves, secure the area, burn the corruption. This world will heal, and the Emperor's light will shine here again." As the space wolves moved to carry out their orders, Logan looked up at the sky. The clouds were beginning to break, and for the first time since he'd arrived on Krelian Prime, he saw sunlight. Maybe there was hope after all. 3 months. That's how long Logan had been fighting alongside the space wolves when everything changed again. 3 months of war across a dozen worlds, 3 months of battling traitors, demons, and horrors that defied description. 3 months of learning what it meant to be part of the rout. the savage brotherhood, the unwavering loyalty, the howling defiance in the face of impossible odds. Logan had earned his place among them. The Space Wolves no longer looked at him as a curiosity or a potential threat. They called him Little Brother without irony, included him in their sagas, and trusted him to watch their backs in the heat of battle. He'd saved Gunnar's life on Mordian 7 when a Thousand Suns sorcerer tried to turn the wolf's mind inside out. Logan's claws had ended that threat permanently. He'd fought beside Bloodhowl on the Plague Hulk Eternal Rot, carving through Nurgle's demons in the ship's corrupted corridors. He'd even drunk the Space Wolves' legendary Mjard and survived, though his healing factor had worked overtime to process the alcohol content that would have killed a normal human. But the heresy ground on, relentless and brutal. For every world they saved, 10 more fell to chaos. The Imperium was losing, slowly but surely, and even the Space Wolves' ferocity couldn't turn the tide. They were on a world called Prospero, or what remained of it. Logan had heard the story from the Wolves. Prospero had been the homeworld of the Thousand Suns, another Space Marine Legion. The Emperor had ordered the Space Wolves to bring Magnus the Red, the Thousand Suns Primarch, to Terra for judgment. Magnus had delved too deep into sorcery, broken the Emperor's edicts, and the Wolves had been unleashed to punish him. The battle had been catastrophic. Prospero's cities had burned. The Thousand Suns had been shattered, their legions scattered, and Magnus himself had fled into the warp, taking his surviving sons with him to serve the chaos god Tzeentch. Now Prospero was a dead world, its surface covered in ash and the ruins of what had once been magnificent libraries and academies. The Space Wolves had returned to search for something. Bloodhowl wouldn't say what, but Logan could tell it was important. They'd set up a temporary base in the ruins of Tisca, Prospero's former capital. Logan stood on a balcony overlooking the devastated city, watching ash fall like snow. It reminded him of Hiroshima, of the photographs he'd seen of cities destroyed by atomic fire. But this had been worse. This hadn't been bombs. This had been Space Marines unleashed without restraint. Regretting your choice. Gunnar's voice came from behind him. Logan turned. The Space Wolf looked tired, his armor scarred by months of constant warfare. They all looked tired. Even the superhuman Space Marines had their limits. Just thinking, Logan said, about what it costs. All this fighting, all this death. Gunnar joined him at the balcony's edge. The heresy costs everything. That's what makes it a heresy. Brother fights brother. Primarch betrays Primarch. The dream of unity the Emperor built. It's all burning. He was quiet for a moment. We destroyed this world, you know. The Thousand Suns were our brothers once, but they fell to sorcery, and we were the ones who brought them to heal. Some of the younger pups think we were right. Some think we went too far. He looked at Logan. What do you think? Logan thought about the X-Men, about the times he'd fought people he'd once called friends, about the schisms that had torn the team apart, the ideological battles that had turned allies into enemies. I think war makes monsters of everyone, he said finally. And the only thing you can do is try to hold on to whatever humanity you got left. Humanity, Gunnar repeated, tasting the word. That's what the Emperor wanted for us. To be more than human, but to remember what it means to be human. Some of the legions forgot. They became weapons without conscience, monsters without restraint. He gestured at the ruins. And this is what happens when weapons turn on their makers. Before Logan could respond, an alarm blared across the base. The Space Wolves moved instantly, grabbing weapons and forming defensive positions. Bloodhowl's voice boomed over the Vox network. All units, we have incoming. Multiple warp signatures detected. Prepare for... The sky tore open. Logan had seen the warp before. Brief glimpses when demons manifested or sorcerers worked their dark magic. But this was different. This was a full-scale warp rift, a wound in reality that bled madness and impossible colors. and through it came ships, massive vessels that looked like they'd been grown rather than built, their hulls covered in eyes and mouths, and things that defied description. The Thousand Sons had returned to Prospero. To arms, Bloodhowl roared. The sorcerers seek revenge. Show them the route remembers how to kill traitors. Drop pods began raining from the Thousand Sons' ships, slamming into Prospero's surface with ground-shaking impacts. The pods opened, and out stepped warriors in ornate blue and gold armor covered in arcane symbols that hurt to look at. These weren't the Savage World Eaters or the diseased Death Guard. These were warrior scholars, space marines who'd mastered both blade and spell, and they were angry. The battle erupted with shocking speed. The Thousand Sons advanced in perfect formation, their bolters barking in disciplined volleys, while their sorcerers unleashed warp fire that turned space wolves into screaming torches. The wolves responded with their characteristic fury, charging into close combat where their frost blades could do the most damage. Logan found himself fighting alongside Gunnar against a Thousand Sons rubric marine, one of the Legion's rank and file, transformed by dark sorcery into an empty suit of armor animated by warp energy. The rubric marine moved with eerie precision, its bolter firing in perfect rhythm, but there was nothing behind its eye lenses. Just emptiness. "They're already dead," Gunnar shouted, his frost blade carving through another rubric marine. Magnus's sorcery turned them into automatons. Destroy the armor, and they'll fall. Logan dodged a bolt round and closed the distance, his claws finding the joints in the rubric marine's armor. The adamantium punched through, and the armor collapsed, spilling nothing but dust. No blood, no organs, just dust and the fading echo of a soul that had been consumed by sorcery. More rubric marines advanced, and Logan fought with desperate efficiency. But for every one he destroyed, 2 more appeared. The Thousand Sons were overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Then Logan felt it, a presence that made his healing factor spike in alarm. He turned and saw a figure descending from the sky, borne on wings of warp fire. It was a Thousand Sons sorcerer, but not just any sorcerer. This one radiated power, his armor covered in scrolls and tomes, his staff crackling with eldritch energy. Azek Ahriman, Gunnar breathed, his voice tight with recognition. Chief Librarian of the Thousand Sons, one of Magnus's most powerful disciples. Ahriman landed in the center of the battlefield, and his voice boomed across the ruins, amplified by sorcery. "Space wolves, you destroyed our world, you burned our libraries, you slaughtered our brothers." His staff struck the ground, and a shockwave of psychic energy exploded outward, throwing space wolves off their feet. "Now you will pay for your crimes. Magnus the Red demands vengeance, and I am his instrument." He raised his staff, and the warp responded. Reality twisted, and Logan saw impossible things. Angles that shouldn't exist, colors that had no names, shapes that made his eyes bleed just looking at them. Space wolves began to scream as their minds were assaulted by visions of madness. Bloodhowl charged Ahriman, his thunderhammer raised. "Your Primarch was a traitor and a fool. Face me, sorcerer, and I'll send you to join him in damnation." Ahriman gestured almost casually, and Bloodhowl was lifted off his feet by invisible force, suspended in mid-air. The Jarl struggled, but he might as well have been caught in adamantium chains. "You understand nothing," Ahriman said coldly. "Magnus sought only knowledge, only enlightenment. But the Emperor feared what we might learn, and he sent you, his executioners, to destroy us. You are the traitors, Wolf. You and your ignorant Primarch." He began to close his fist, and Logan saw Bloodhowl's armor start to crumple, the ceramite buckling under impossible pressure. The Jarl's howl of pain cut through the battlefield, and Logan felt something snap inside him. Rage, pure, primal rage that he'd spent decades learning to control. But this wasn't the berserker fury Khorne had tried to inflict on him. This was his rage, born from seeing his pack, his brothers, hurt by this arrogant sorcerer. Logan charged, moving faster than he'd ever moved before. Ahriman turned toward him, surprise flickering across what was visible of his face, and raised his staff to strike Logan down with sorcery. But Logan was already inside his guard, his claws driving toward Ahriman's throat. The sorcerer's protective wards flared, psychic shields that should have stopped any physical attack. But adamantium was the hardest metal in Logan's universe, and it didn't care about psychic shields. His claws punched through the wards like they were paper and found flesh beneath. Ahriman screamed, a sound of shock and pain, and staggered back, blood pouring from the wounds in his throat. He tried to speak, to cast a spell, but Logan's claws had severed something vital. The sorcerer collapsed, his staff clattering from his hands. Bloodhowl dropped to the ground as Ahriman's concentration broke. The Jarl stood slowly, his armor cracked but intact, and looked at Logan with something like awe. You struck down Ahriman," Bloodhowl said. "One of the most powerful sorcerers in the galaxy, and you killed him with your bare hands." Logan looked down at his claws, still dripping with Ahriman's blood. "He hurt my pack," he said simply. But Ahriman wasn't dead. His wounds were already beginning to heal, sorcery knitting flesh and bone. His eyes opened, glowing with warp fire, and he spoke in a voice that echoed with power. "Impressive, mortal. But I am beyond death. I am..." Gunnar's frost blade took Ahriman's head off in one clean stroke. The sorcerer's body collapsed. Truly dead this time, and the Thousand Suns' assault faltered. Without Ahriman's leadership, their perfect discipline began to crack. The Space Wolves pressed their advantage, and slowly, brutally, they drove the Thousand Suns back. By the time the sun set over Prospero's ruins, the battle was over. The Thousand Suns had retreated, their ships fleeing back into the warp. The Space Wolves had won. But the cost had been high. A dozen wolves lay dead, their gene seed harvested for future generations. Twice that number were wounded, their armor shattered and their bodies broken. Bloodhowl stood among the dead, his thunderhammer resting on the ground. He looked old, Logan realized. Tired and old, despite his superhuman vitality. "This is what the heresy is," the Jarl said quietly. "Brother killing brother, no glory, no honor, just necessity." He looked at Logan. "You saved my life today, Skjald. You killed one of the most dangerous sorcerers in the galaxy to protect your pack. That's a debt I can never repay." "You gave me a place when I had none," Logan said. "We're even." Bloodhowl smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "No, little brother. We're pack, and pack doesn't keep score." As the Space Wolves prepared to leave Prospero, Logan looked back at the ruins one last time. He thought about the Thousand Suns, about how they'd been punished for seeking knowledge, about how the Space Wolves had been the ones to deliver that punishment, about how both sides thought they were right. War made monsters of everyone. Logan had said that to Gunnar, and he believed it. But maybe, just maybe, you could be a monster and still protect the people you cared about. Maybe that was enough. The call came 6 weeks after Prospero. Logan was in the training cages aboard the Hafenkel, the Space Wolves' battle barge, sparring with a young bloodclaw named Tormund. The kid, and at barely 50 years old, he was a kid by Space Marine standards, was eager to prove himself, throwing wild haymakers that Logan dodged with practiced ease. "You're telegraphing every punch," Logan said, ducking under another swing. "In a real fight, you'd be dead 3 times over." Tormund snarled and lunged, and Logan swept his legs, sending the Space Wolf crashing to the deck. The other wolves, watching from outside the cage, howled with laughter. "Again," Tormund demanded, his pride wounded more than his body. But before Logan could respond, the ship's alarms blared. Not the combat alert they'd all become grimly familiar with, but something different. Something that made every space wolf in the training deck go still. Bloodhowl's voice came over the Vox, and for the first time since Logan had known him, the Jarl sounded shaken. All warriors to the Strategium, immediately. We've received word from Terra. The Space Wolves moved as one, their earlier levity forgotten. Logan followed Gunnar through the ship's corridors, his instinct screaming that something terrible had happened. The other wolves felt it too, their usual boisterous energy replaced by grim silence. The Strategium was packed when they arrived. Every officer, every pack leader, every veteran who could be spared from their duties. They stood in concentric circles around a hololith projector, and on that projector was an image that made Logan's blood run cold. Terra, the throne world of the Imperium, humanity's cradle, the Emperor's seat of power, and it was under siege. The image showed a planet surrounded by a fleet so massive it blotted out the star. Thousands of ships, traitor vessels bearing the marks of the War Master's forces. And on the planet's surface, Logan could see the telltale signs of orbital bombardment and ground assault. Bloodhowl stood before the hololith, his face carved from stone. "Brothers," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the Strategium, "the War Master has done the unthinkable. Horus Lupercal, the Emperor's favored son, has brought his armada to Terra itself. He seeks to storm the Imperial Palace and slay our father." Silence. Absolute, terrible silence. Then one of the older wolves spoke, his voice hoarse. "What are our orders, Jarl?" "We make for Terra with all speed," Bloodhowl said. "Every loyal legion still able to fight is converging on the throne world. The Ultramarines, the Dark Angels, the Blood Angels, all racing to break the siege. But it will take time, and time is something Terra doesn't have." He paused, his jaw tight. "Leman Russ himself leads the Space Wolves fleet. We will join our Primarch, and together we will show the traitors what it means to threaten our father's throne." The Space Wolves howled, a sound of fury and determination that shook the ship's bulkheads. Logan felt it in his bones, that primal call to war, but beneath the fury, he felt something else. Fear. He'd heard the stories about Horus Lupercal, the War Master, the Emperor's greatest son, the one who'd been chosen to lead the Great Crusade when the Emperor returned to Terra. A Primarch so charismatic, so brilliant, that even his brother Primarchs had followed him without question. And now that same Primarch was trying to kill his father and plunge the galaxy into eternal darkness. After the briefing, Logan found Gunnar on one of the observation decks, staring out at the warp space rushing past the ship. The Space Wolf's expression was distant, troubled. "You okay?" Logan asked. Gunnar didn't look at him. "I met Horus once, before the Heresy, before he fell." He was quiet for a moment. He was magnificent. Everything a Primarch should be. Strong, wise, compassionate. He treated his sons like they were his own children, not just weapons. And he respected the other legions, even the wolves. Gunnar's hands clenched into fists. I would have followed him anywhere. We all would have. And now he's trying to kill the Emperor, and I don't understand how someone like that could fall so far. Logan thought about people he'd known who'd fallen to darkness, friends who'd become enemies, heroes who'd become villains. "Power corrupts," he said, "and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Maybe Horus got too much of both." "Maybe," Gunnar said. "Or maybe the warp got its claws in him and twisted him into something he was never meant to be." He finally looked at Logan. "You know what the worst part is? Part of me still doesn't want to fight him. Part of me still remembers the War Master as he was, and it feels like betrayal to raise a weapon against him." "But you will," Logan said. "It wasn't a question." "Aye," Gunnar said heavily. "I will. Because the Emperor is our father, and Horus is threatening him. Pack comes first, always." He managed a bitter smile. "Doesn't mean it won't hurt." The journey to Terra took 3 weeks of hard warp travel. 3 weeks of preparation, of weapon drills and prayer rituals, of space wolves sharpening their blades and reciting the sagas of their fallen brothers. Logan spent the time maintaining his gear and trying not to think about what was waiting for them. He'd fought in wars before, but this was different. This was the final battle of the Horus Heresy, the moment when everything would be decided. Either the Emperor would prevail and the Imperium would survive, or Horus would win and humanity would be enslaved to chaos forever. No pressure. When they finally translated back into real space at the edge of the Sol system, Logan got his first look at the siege of Terra, and it was worse than he'd imagined. The traitor fleet was impossibly vast, thousands of ships ranging from small frigates to massive battleships the size of cities. They'd formed a blockade around Terra, their guns hammering the planet's orbital defenses, while drop ships and boarding pods rained down on the surface like a steel storm, and the planet itself. Logan had seen Terra in history books from his own time, a blue-green jewel covered in oceans and forests. But 30,000 years in the future, Terra was a hive world, its entire surface covered in cities and industrial complexes. And now, those cities were burning. Emperor's teeth, one of the younger wolves breathed. "Stay focused," Bloodhowl commanded. "We're not here to sightsee, we're here to fight." He pointed at the hololith, which showed the Space Wolves' fleet, a dozen battle barges and twice that many strike cruisers approaching from the system's edge. And at the fleet's center was a ship that dwarfed all the others, a vessel so massive it looked like a mobile fortress, the Hrafnkull's Claw, Leman Russ's flagship. "We're being hailed," the ship's navigator reported. "The Wolf King himself wants to address the fleet." The hololith flickered and a figure appeared. Logan had seen Primarchs before. He'd caught glimpses of Magnus during the Prospero battle, and he'd heard descriptions of others, but nothing had prepared him for Leman Russ. The Wolf King was massive, easily twice the size of his Space Marine sons, his armor the color of storm clouds and covered in wolf pelts and runic inscriptions. His face was fierce and noble, framed by a mane of wild red hair and a beard braided with totems and bones, but it was his eyes that caught Logan. They were the eyes of a predator, ancient and knowing, but also warm with fierce love for his sons. "My wolves," Russ said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in Logan's chest. "We stand at the threshold of the greatest battle our Legion has ever fought. Below us, Terra burns. Our father, the Emperor, faces betrayal from his most beloved son. And we, the Vilka Fenrika, the Emperor's executioners, have been called to do what we do best." His expression hardened. "We will break the traitor fleet, we will fight our way to the surface, and we will stand beside our father when he faces the War Master. This is our purpose, this is our destiny, and we will not fail." He raised Mjolnir, his legendary frost blade, and the weapon blazed with cold fire. "For the Emperor, for Terra, for the All-Father, for the All-Father." The response from every Space Wolf in the fleet was deafening, a howl of defiance that seemed to shake reality itself. The Space Wolves' fleet surged forward, and the Battle of Terra began in earnest. The Hrafnkull plunged into the traitor fleet like a spear, its weapons batteries firing in continuous volleys. Logan watched from the observation deck as the void lit up with lance strikes and torpedo spreads, as ships on both sides exploded in silent fury. The Space Wolves were outnumbered, but they fought with the desperation of warriors who knew this was the last stand. "Brace for impact," the navigator shouted, and Logan grabbed a support rail as the ship shuddered from a direct hit. Alarms blared, and he heard the distant sound of hull breaches being sealed. "Boarding parties detected," another voice called. "Traitors are trying to board us." Bloodhowl's response was immediate. "All packs, repel boarders. Show these traitors what happens when they step into a wolf's den." Logan ran with Gunner and the rest of their pack toward the breach points, his claws extended and his bolt pistol ready. They reached one of the ship's airlocks just as it exploded inward, and traitor space marines poured through. Sons of Horus, their armor sea green and covered in the Eye of Horus symbol. The two forces collided in the narrow corridor, and it became a brutal close-quarters melee. Logan ducked under a chainsword swing and drove his claws into a son of Horus's gut, tearing upward through armor and flesh. The traitor gurgled and fell, and Logan was already moving to the next target. These weren't corrupted monsters like the Death Guard or mindless automatons like the Rubric Marines. These were the War Master's chosen, elite warriors who'd once been the pride of the Imperium. They fought with skill and discipline, and they were winning, until Leman Russ himself arrived. The Wolf King came through the corridor like a force of nature, Mjolnir carving through traitor space marines like they were made of paper. His presence was overwhelming, not just his physical size, but the sheer aura of power that radiated from him. This was a Primarch, a demigod made flesh, and the sons of Horus broke before him like waves against a cliff. Logan found himself fighting back to back with the Wolf King, and for a brief, surreal moment, their eyes met. Russ looked at him with surprise, then recognition, then something that might have been respect. "You're the mutant my sons have been talking about," Russ said, his voice carrying even over the sounds of battle. "The one who fights like a wolf." "That's me," Logan said, decapitating another son of Horus. Russ laughed, a sound like thunder. "Then fight well, little brother. We'll speak more when this is done." Together, the Space Wolves drove the borders back and sealed the breaches. But Logan knew this was just the beginning. The real battle was still to come. The Space Wolves' fleet carved a bloody path through the traitor blockade, but the cost was staggering. Logan watched from the Hraffinkel's observation deck as two strike cruisers were torn apart by concentrated fire from a word-bearer's battleship, their crews dying in the silent explosions. Another battle barge, the Frost Fang, rammed a Death Guard vessel in a desperate maneuver, both ships disappearing in a blinding detonation that left nothing but debris. But the wolves pressed on. They had to. Terror was dying below them. After 6 hours of brutal void combat, the fleet finally broke through the blockade. Drop pods and Thunderhawks launched in waves, screaming through Terra's atmosphere toward the surface. Logan was crammed into a Thunderhawk with Gunner's pack, the transport shaking violently as it descended through anti-aircraft fire. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot shouted over the Vox. Logan checked his weapons one last time. Bolt pistol loaded, claws ready. The new armor the wolves had given him was scarred and dented from months of fighting, but it had kept him alive. That was all that mattered. The Thunderhawk hit the ground hard, its assault ramp dropping with a hiss of hydraulics. Logan charged out with the Space Wolves, and his first breath of Terra's air nearly made him gag. It tasted of smoke and chemicals, of burning promethium and death. They'd landed in what had once been a city. Logan didn't know which one, and it didn't matter. The buildings were shattered ruins, streets torn up by artillery bombardment. Bodies lay everywhere, Imperial Army soldiers and civilians caught in the crossfire. And fighting through the ruins were the traitors, world eaters frothing with battle rage, Emperor's children lost in their pursuit of sensation, Iron Warriors advancing behind mobile fortifications. "Secure the landing zone," Bloodhowl commanded. "We need to hold this position until the Wolf King arrives." The Space Wolves fanned out, taking cover behind rubble and returning fire at the advancing traitors. Logan found himself in a bombed-out building, trading shots with a squad of Iron Warriors. His bolt pistol barked, and one of the traitors went down, his helmet shattered. But more kept coming, their discipline and firepower overwhelming. "We're getting flanked!" Tormund shouted from Logan's left. Logan looked and saw World Eaters charging from an adjacent street, their chain axes raised and their mouths frothing with stim chemicals and rage. They weren't trying to be tactical, they were just trying to kill everything in their path. "Gunner!" Logan called. World Eaters, west side." "I see them," Gunnar roared. He raised his frost blade. "Wolves, into the fray. Show these berserkers what real warriors look like." The Space Wolves charged to meet the World Eaters, and the two forces collided in a storm of blood and fury. Logan found himself facing a World Eater twice his size, the traitor's chain axe screaming as it descended toward his head. Logan rolled aside, the weapon gouging a chunk out of the pavement, and drove his claws into the World Eater's knee. The traitor stumbled, and Logan followed up with a strike to the throat, his adamantium claws punching through the gorget and severing the spine. But there were too many. For every World Eater that fell, two more appeared. Logan's healing factor was working overtime, repairing damage from glancing blows and shrapnel, but even he had limits. Then the sky lit up with drop pods, dozens of them, slamming into the ground with earth-shaking impacts. The pods opened, and out stepped more Space Wolves, these ones wearing Terminator armor and carrying heavy weapons, and leading them was Leman Russ himself, Mjolnir blazing with cold fire. "Wolves!" the Primarch roared. "To me!" The Space Wolves rallied around their Gene Father, and the tide of battle shifted. Russ was a whirlwind of death, his frost blade carving through World Eaters and Iron Warriors with contemptuous ease. Where he walked, traitors died, and his sons fought with renewed fury, inspired by his presence. Logan found himself swept up in the advance, fighting alongside warriors who were living legends. He saw Bjorn the Fell-Handed, a wolf lord who would one day be entombed in a dreadnought, tearing through Emperor's children with his lightning claws. He saw packs of Wolfguard working in perfect coordination, their centuries of experience showing in every movement. And he saw Leman Russ pause in the middle of the battlefield, his head tilting as if listening to something only he could hear. The Primarch's expression darkened, and he turned to Bloodhowl. "The Emperor calls?" Russ said, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "He's in the Imperial Palace, facing Horus. I must go to him." He looked at his assembled warriors. "Hold this position. No matter what happens, hold it. If I don't return..." He trailed off, then shook his head. "I will return, with the War Master's head on a spike." He activated his jump pack and launched into the air, a streak of gray and red heading toward the massive structure that dominated Terra's skyline. The Imperial Palace, a fortress city so vast it could house billions. Logan watched him go and felt a chill run down his spine. Something about this felt wrong. Final. "You feel it too," Gunnar said quietly, appearing at Logan's side. "Like we're standing at the end of something." "Yeah," Logan said. "I feel it." The Space Wolves dug in, fortifying their position and preparing for the inevitable counterattack. It came an hour later, a massive push by the traitor forces, thousands of Chaos Space Marines and cultists and demons surging toward the Wolves' lines. The battle that followed was the most brutal Logan had ever experienced. It made Galmec look like a skirmish. It made Krelian Prime look like a training exercise. This was total war, the kind where victory was measured in meters of blood-soaked ground, and the only question was whether you'd die standing or die running. Logan fought until his arms felt like lead, until his healing factor was so exhausted it could barely keep up with the damage, until he'd lost count of how many traitors he'd killed. He fought beside Gunnar and Tormund and a dozen other wolves, whose names he'd learned over the months. He fought because there was nothing else to do, because stopping meant dying, and he'd be damned if he'd die on Terra after surviving everything else the Heresy had thrown at him. And then, suddenly, it was over. The traitors broke. Not just retreated, broke. They turned and ran, their discipline shattering, their rage turning to fear. Logan didn't understand why until he heard the howls of triumph from the Space Wolves around him. "The War Master is dead," someone shouted. "Horus has fallen." Logan's legs gave out and he collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. Dead? Horus was dead. That meant the Emperor won, Gunnar said, his voice filled with relief and exhaustion. Our father defeated the War Master. The heresy is over. But there was something in Gunnar's tone, a hesitation, a note of uncertainty, that made Logan look up. What is it? What's wrong? Gunnar's expression was grim. The Emperor won, but at what cost? They found out 3 days later, after the last traitor forces had been driven from Terra and the Space Wolves had secured the Imperial Palace. The Emperor lived, but barely. Logan stood in the throne room with the assembled Space Wolves and saw the Golden Throne, a massive device that looked like equal parts life support system and torture device. And seated on that throne, barely alive, was the Emperor of mankind. Logan had never seen the Emperor before. The being on the throne was impossibly tall, impossibly thin, his body ravaged by wounds that even his godlike physiology couldn't fully heal. But his eyes still burned with terrible purpose. Leman Russ knelt before his father, tears streaming down his face. Father, we came as fast as we could. If we'd been faster. You came when you were needed, the Emperor said, his voice a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. You and your brothers saved Terra. That is enough. What happens now? Russ asked. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Now I must sit this throne. Forever. It will keep me alive, keep my consciousness anchored to reality, but I will never walk among humanity again. I will be a corpse on a golden throne, a god to be worshipped but never known. His gaze swept across the assembled Space Wolves. And you, my sons, must carry on without me. You must protect the Imperium I built, even as it slowly crumbles. Logan felt something break inside him. They'd won. They'd defeated Horus, saved Terra, preserved the Imperium. But the cost. The Emperor's eyes found Logan, and for a moment the two of them locked gazes. Logan felt his mind laid bare, every memory, every secret, every moment of his long life examined in an instant. James Howlett, the Emperor, said, and Logan's blood ran cold. No one here knew his real name. No one except, you are not of this time. You are a traveler from another age, another reality, and yet you fought for my Imperium with the courage of my finest warriors. Logan didn't know what to say. He just stood there, frozen, as the Emperor continued. You wish to return home. To your own time, your own universe. I can grant you that wish. The Emperor raised one skeletal hand, and reality rippled. But know this. The Imperium will remember you. The Space Wolves will sing sagas of Skjald Logan, the mutant who fought like a wolf, and perhaps, in some distant future, you will return to us when we need you most. The ripple became a tear, a portal opening in the air beside Logan. Through it, he could see snow, mountains, the X-Mansion, home. Logan looked at Gunnar, at Bloodhowl, at all the Space Wolves who'd become his pack. Go, little brother, Gunnar said, his voice thick with emotion. You've earned your rest, but remember us. Remember the route. Always, Logan said. He stepped through the portal, and the Warhammer 40,000 universe disappeared behind him. Logan woke up in snow. For a moment, he just lay there, staring up at a gray sky that looked almost painfully normal after months of warp-tainted skies and burning worlds. The cold bit into his skin. Real cold, not the unnatural chill of Nurgle's plagues or the psychic frost of the Space Wolves' weapons. Just winter. He sat up slowly, his body aching in ways that even his healing factor couldn't immediately fix. He was still wearing the armor the Space Wolves had given him, now scarred and battered beyond recognition. His claws were still extended, dried blood, human, Xenos, demonic, caked on the adamantium. And he was alone. Logan looked around and recognized where he was. The woods outside the X-Mansion, maybe half a mile from the main building. The same woods where he'd been when the portal had taken him. Had he been gone for minutes? Hours? Or had time passed differently here? He retracted his claws and stood, his legs unsteady. The armor's weight felt wrong now, too heavy without the constant adrenaline of combat. He started walking toward the mansion, his enhanced senses picking up familiar scents. Pine trees, deer, the distant smell of Scott's motorcycle exhaust. Normal. Everything was so impossibly normal. The mansion came into view through the trees, and Logan stopped. It looked exactly as he remembered. No damage, no signs of battle. The windows were lit with warm yellow light, and he could hear voices inside. Students laughing, someone playing music. Peace. Logan's hands started shaking. He'd spent months fighting in a war where peace was just a memory, where every day brought new horrors, and the only certainty was death. And now he was home, and everything was fine, and his mind couldn't process the disconnect. He forced himself to keep walking, made it to the front door, raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What would he even say? Where would he start? The door opened before he could decide, and John Gray stood there, her eyes widening in shock. Logan? Oh my God, we've been looking everywhere for you. You've been gone for 3 hours and... She stopped, really looking at him, at the armor, at the blood, at the expression on his face. Logan, what happened? John. His voice came out rough, unused to speaking without the constant background noise of war. How long have I been gone? 3 hours, she repeated, concern deepening in her eyes. You went for a walk in the woods, and when you didn't come back, Scott organized a search party. We were about to... Logan, you're scaring me. What's wrong? 3 hours? He'd been gone 3 hours, and he'd lived months in the 41st millennium. Time dilation. The portal had dumped him back almost exactly when he'd left. I need to sit down, Logan said. John helped him inside, her telepathy probably picking up the chaos in his mind. Other X-Men appeared. Scott, Aurora, Hank, their expressions shifting from relief to alarm as they saw his condition. Logan, what happened to you? Hank asked, his scientific mind already analyzing the armor. This equipment, I've never seen anything like it. The metallurgy alone is centuries beyond our current technology. Try 30,000 years, Logan muttered. They got him to the medical bay, where Hank insisted on running scans while Logan told them everything. About the portal, about the Warhammer 40,000 universe, about the Horus Heresy and the Space Wolves and the months of war he'd survived. He told them about Galmec and the World Eaters, about Krelian Prime and Typhon the Traveler, about Prospero and killing Ahriman, about Terra burning and the Emperor dying to save humanity. He told them everything, and they listened in stunned silence. That's... Scott started, then stopped. That's impossible. You're saying you spent months in another universe, fighting in a galaxy-spanning civil war, and only 3 hours passed here. That's what I'm saying, Logan confirmed. He was out of the armor now, wearing borrowed clothes while Hank studied the Space Wolves' gear with fascination. And it was real, all of it. I got the scars to prove it. Except he didn't. His healing factor had already erased most of the damage, leaving only the psychological scars, the memories of things he'd seen, things he'd done. Your mind, John said softly, her hand on his shoulder. Logan, I can feel the trauma. It's like you've lived through a war that lasted years, not months. The things you saw, the battles you fought. No one should have to carry that alone. I'm not alone, Logan said. I had a pack, the Space Wolves. They... He trailed off, suddenly feeling the loss like a physical weight. Gunnar, Bloodhowl, Tormund. All the wolves who'd accepted him, fought beside him, called him brother. They were 30,000 years in the future, in another universe entirely, and he'd never see them again. They were your family, Aurora said gently. Even if only for a short time. Yeah, Logan said. They were. Hank cleared his throat. I hate to be clinical at a moment like this, but Logan, the technology you brought back is extraordinary. This armor, these weapons, if I could study them, reverse engineer even a fraction of the innovations, it could advance the human technology by decades. Logan thought about that. About bringing the grim darkness of the 41st millennium to his own time. About the weapons and armor that had been designed for eternal war. No, he said firmly. Destroy it. All of it. Logan. I said no, Hank. Logan's voice was hard. That universe is hell. It's a place where humanity's only purpose is to fight and die in the name of a corpse god. Where children are turned into weapons and entire worlds are burned because they worship the wrong gods. We don't need that here. We don't need any of it. Hank looked like he wanted to argue, but Jean shook her head at him. The scientist subsided, though Logan could tell he wasn't happy about it. What will you do now? Scott asked. Logan didn't have an answer. What did you do after living through the Horus Heresy? How did you go back to teaching classes and going on missions and pretending everything was normal? I don't know, he admitted. But I need time. Time to process. Time to remember I'm human. They gave him that time. Days turned into weeks, and Logan slowly readjusted to life at the mansion. He went through the motions, teaching his classes, training in the danger room, going on missions with the team. But part of him was still on Terra, still fighting beside the space wolves, still hearing Gunnar's laugh and Bloodhowl's battle cries. He had nightmares. Not the usual ones about his past, but new ones. Dreams where he was back in the 41st millennium, where the portal had never opened and he was trapped in that eternal war. Dreams where he watched the space wolves die, unable to save them. Dreams where he became one of the chaos corrupted, his healing factor twisted into something monstrous. Jean helped when she could, using her telepathy to ease the worst of the trauma. But some wounds went too deep even for her powers. One night, about a month after his return, Logan was in the mansion's library, unable to sleep. He'd been reading, or trying to, when he heard footsteps behind him. Can't sleep either? Aurora asked, settling into a chair across from him. Nope, Logan said. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Aurora spoke again. You know, I've been thinking about what you told us. About the Emperor and his dream of unity, about how it all fell apart because his sons couldn't live up to that dream. What about it? It reminds me of us, Aurora said. The X-Men. We're trying to build something better, trying to prove that humans and mutants can coexist. But we fail, again and again. People die. Friends become enemies. The dream seems impossible. She looked at Logan. But we keep trying, because the alternative is giving up, and that's not who we are. Logan thought about that. About the Emperor on his golden throne, keeping humanity alive through sheer force of will even though his dream had died. About Lehman Russ and the Space Wolves, fighting for an imperium that would slowly decay into the nightmare Logan had glimpsed in his visions of the 41st millennium. The difference, Logan said slowly, is that we still have a chance. The Emperor's dream died 10,000 years before I even arrived in that universe. But here, now, we can still make it work. Exactly, Aurora said, smiling. So don't lose hope, Logan. What you experienced was terrible, but it doesn't have to define you. You survived, you came home, and now you can use what you learned to make sure our future doesn't turn out like theirs. Logan felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Aurora was right. He'd survived the Horus Heresy. He'd fought beside demigods and faced demons and lived to tell the tale. And now he was home, and he had a chance to make sure his universe never became as dark as the one he'd left behind. "Thanks, Ro," he said quietly. "Anytime, old friend." 6 months after his return, Logan was in the danger room, running a training scenario with some of the younger students. It was a simple exercise. Urban combat, hostage rescue, nothing too intense. But Logan found himself barking orders in the same tone Bloodhowl had used, organizing the students into packs, teaching them to watch each other's backs. The students responded well, working together with a cohesion they'd never shown before. And Logan realized he was teaching them what the Space Wolves had taught him, that strength came from the pack, from trust and loyalty, and the willingness to die for your brothers and sisters. After the session, one of the students, a kid named Marcus with enhanced strength, approached him nervously. "Mr. Logan, can I ask you something?" "Shoot, kid. You've been different since you came back from wherever you went. More focused, more..." Marcus struggled for the word. "More like a soldier, I guess. What happened to you?" Logan considered lying, brushing it off. But these kids deserved better than that. "I learned what it means to be part of something bigger than myself," he said. "I learned that even when everything's going to hell, you can still fight for what matters. And I learned that the people you fight beside, they're what make you strong." He put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Remember that, kid. Powers don't make you a hero. The people you protect, the family you build, that's what matters." Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful, and walked away. Logan watched him go and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Maybe the Emperor's dream had died. Maybe the Imperium was doomed to 10,000 years of darkness. But here, in his own universe, Logan could still make a difference. He could teach the next generation. He could fight for a better future. He could honor the memory of the Space Wolves who'd called him brother. That night, Logan stood outside the mansion, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, 30,000 years in the future and in another universe entirely, the Space Wolves were still fighting, still howling their defiance at the darkness. Logan raised his hand in salute, his claws extending briefly in tribute. "For the All-Father," he whispered. "For the route." Then he retracted his claws, turned, and walked back inside. He was home, and he had work to do. Fenris, M42, 10,000 years after the Horus Heresy. The young Bloodclaw sat by the fire in the great hall, listening with rapt attention as the ancient wolf priest told the saga. Around them, dozens of other space wolves listened, some hearing the story for the first time, others for the 100th. And so it was that Skjald Logan, the mutant who fought like a wolf, stood beside the Wolf King himself at the Siege of Terra. The priest intoned. Though he was not Fenrisian, though he bore no gene seed of Russ, he proved himself worthy of the rout. He saved Jarl Bloodhowl from the sorcerer Ahriman. He fought demons on Krelian Prime. He charged into battle with nothing but his claws and his courage. "What happened to him?" the Bloodclaw asked. "After Terra?" The wolf priest smiled. The Allfather himself opened a portal and sent Logan home to his own time and place. But the saga says he will return when the Imperium needs him most. When the long night is darkest, Skjald Logan will walk among us again. His claws ready, his heart fierce, his loyalty unbreakable. The Bloodclaw's eyes shone with wonder. "Do you think it's true? That he'll return?" "I think," the wolf priest said, "that the best sagas are the ones we choose to believe. And I choose to believe that somewhere, across time and space, Logan Howlett still fights, still protects, still honors the pack." He raised his drinking horn. "To Skjald Logan, may his claws stay sharp and his healing factor stay strong." "To Skjald Logan," the assembled wolves roared, and their howls echoed through the great hall, a tribute to a warrior who'd earned his place in their legends and in a universe far away. In a time long past, Logan Howlett paused in his training, his enhanced hearing catching something that shouldn't be possible. The distant echo of space wolves howling his name. He smiled. "For the All-Father," he murmured. "For the route." Then he returned to his work, teaching the next generation of X-Men, protecting a world that didn't know how close it had come to a darker future. The pack endured. Always. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.